Hello, welcome back to Rev Endurance Sports and another edition of Rev Reviews. We're going to do an unboxing of a power meter, but before we get going, if you've been coming onto the channel or if it's your first time here, what we talk about here oftentimes is product reviews, basic maintenance, although sometimes I get a little bit deeper into something, and just general information about cycling and bike repair. And also, because we're still kind of at the tail end, we think, of the COVID-19 pandemic, I also give supply chain updates. So if you think those items are interesting to you, please like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you can be notified when I post another video. All right, so today we're going to talk about the SRAM Red power meter option. Now, there's a couple of ways to get your power meter onto your SRAM cranksets. And there is a previous video I did where I just bought the crank arms and the chain, the chain rings and also the power meter separately. This was a one-buy setup, and I'll link the video in the description below. For SRAM Red, which, if you're not aware of the hierarchy, SRAM Red is the top-of-the-line SRAM components. Below that is Force. And because one has to be better than the other, SRAM Red, they do things a little bit different. And in this case, you have the power meter is integrated into the chain rings. And so you have to order it based on the chain rings that you want. You can't swap out the chain rings, let's say, for a different application. Let's say one day you're doing a really, really hard, let's say 1 week you're going out and doing a really hard climbing sessions, and you want to have smaller chain rings. You're not going to be able to do that. You need to actually have the power meter integrated to the chain rings. Once I show you, you'll see what I mean. With the other application, like let's say the Force, then you can swap out chain rings if you needed to. Okay, let's take a look at this power meter. By the way, really nice box, right? And I will now remove the power meter and set this aside. We'll need one more thing, and I just pull those out. Okay, so this is what I mean by the power meter here is integrated into the chain rings. And I'll zoom that in, or I'll bring this in a little bit closer so you can see it. And then I'm going to turn this around as well. And you can see the power meter here, and then the chain rings there. Now, this design for them, because they integrated everything, they claim a lower weight for the system. And in fact, when I weighed this particular chain ring option, which is a 4835, it weighed at 267. So you're getting the power meter and the chain rings for 267 grams. Apologize for that. 267. And that's a very competitive weight. I mean, really light. Probably the lightest power meter options you can get might be, let's say, a Stages or a 4ii, and they'll have just a tiny plastic pod that's welded onto the crank arm, and they probably weigh 20 grams or so. But remember that 267 includes the chain rings as well. I don't know how much the actual power meter weighs. it's integrated. I can't weigh it separately. They claim 1.5% accuracy. Now, here's the thing about accuracy. I've often said, as long as something is consistent, then you can rely on it. So if it's consistently at 2% accuracy, well, at least it's always 2%. That's fine. At least you won't know that it's only 2% accurate, but at least it'll always display on your computer and download to, let's say, a Training Peaks app, that's your power every time consistently on multiple rides or specifically a climb. So accuracy to me is not that important as long as it's consistently always showing you the same thing. Now, the other thing that they claim is that this particular setup is not affected by ambient temperature. If you're not aware, basically a power meter is like a strain gauge, and strain gauges are made out of metal, and metal, of course, is susceptible to temperature changes. Metal expands, contracts based on heat and cold, and so that can affect your power meter readings. With many other power meters, they have an opportunity for you to do a zero offset and some other things to be able to deal with the inaccurate readings and kind of mitigate that because of weather. Now, one of the things that you'll see here is that this has an 8-bolt mounting to the crank arms, and it comes supplied with these tiny little bolts that you will install your power meter to the crank arms. All right. And also with SRAM AXS, and this is a 12-speed system, the chain rings are the most common chain ring combinations that you have grown familiar with for a long time. The 5339, the 5034, which is 5339 standard, 5034 compact, and then you have the mid compact of 5236. Those chain ring combinations have gone away, and so SRAM came up with a different chain ring options and configurations. And let's say, for example, a 5034, it has 16 teeth difference between the 50 and the 34. They wanted to narrow that gap, so now it's 48-35. So 48 for the large chain ring and 35 for the smaller chain ring. And so now it's only 13 teeth. It just improves shifting. And so that is one of the things that's important to note, that when you're moving over to, let's say, a SRAM setup, that you consider that the chain rings are completely different than what you used to. Their cassette options are also completely different than what you're used to. So you have to do some calculations. Hopefully your local bike shop, you have a gearhead there who can sit down with you on the gear inch calculator and say, this is what you had, this is what would be equivalent and possibly better for you with the new SRAM setups. And one other thing to note, I mentioned it earlier that because this is integrated, you can't just move the chain rings around. When the customer started riding with us, I'm going to tell you just a little bit of a history with this customer. She had been following Lori, one of my training partners, and following me on Strava, and notice these climbing rides and all this stuff. So she wanted to come down and start riding with us on Tuesdays. And she was getting dropped off the back, and she's a strong rider, but her pacing wasn't wasn't that great. And of course, if you've been following my channel, I'm a strong proponent of power meters. So I said, you got to get a power meter. That's how you can pace properly on this ride, because if you're chasing someone, you can look down at your power and realize, wow, I'm not going to be able to sustain this power, let's say for the length of this climb, or if I'm doing this much power now, I'm not going to be able to finish off the ride strong 2 to 3 hours later. Well, she wanted to buy a new bike, and she thought buying a new bike and something lighter, and she had a disc brake Cervelo, and she wanted to get a rim brake something because she thought lighter bike would help her climb better. And honestly, people obsess about weight, and really they should be focused on using a power meter to help themselves pace better. So after a good long discussion about bikes and looking at options, she purchased a lighter disc brake bike. And I say that because they're all heavy anyway. And then she came to me and said, I need a power meter, and I was told I just need to buy the Spider. This would be the Spider. This would be the Spider. But in fact, that information was wrong, because she had a SRAM AXS system. She needed to actually have this type of power meter, which is integrated with the chain rings. So the price doubled from what she thought and what one of her friends had told her that she needed. And, that's always a hard discussion, because in her mind, she's thinking, oh, I just need a power meter. Or to get a power meter, I just need a Spider, and it's only going to cost me this much. And then I have to be the bearer of bad news and say, actually, because you have a SRAM system, you can only use this integrated chainring system for your cranksets or crank arms. So just be aware that your friends may not give you the best or most accurate advice. Please go to your local bike shop, and hopefully they are up to date, or they actually understand what equipment you have and how to make improvements or upgrades. And in this case, that's why I created this channel, because of misinformation or maybe just lack of information. The devil's in the details, they say. And so, yes, getting a power meter on your SRAM system is different than, let's say, getting a power meter on your SRAM Force system. Okay, so unboxing, details, those kinds of things. I won't be able to do an install video because the customer is driving down from about an hour and 15 away, and very fast turnaround time. She needs to drive back up before the traffic gets serious, and she's leaving for Europe in the next day or so. So this, by the way, I wanted to mention one other thing. We have a serious supply chain issue in the world of bicycles and bicycle parts and components and chains, cassettes, and so on, so on, so on. When I had to order this power meter, they gave me dates, and they said the 23rd is when we will have that. And I could not believe that the dates did not slip. They had it ready on the 23rd. They charged my credit card. They shipped from Indiana. I got it yesterday, which was the 30th. So, with shipping time and the weekend in between, they got it here as fast as possible, and they stuck to their production dates and commitment dates. So I thought that was excellent, and I wish more companies would stick to their dates. I'm talking to you, Shimano. But, it is what it is. We all have to be patient. We all have to accept the fact that there is an enormous demand and a lot of factories have had to shut down or have been at half capacity and they just can't get the product out fast enough. Okay, that's all for today. I do appreciate if you've come on to the channel. I do appreciate if you stayed to the end. If you have, please drop a smiley face down below. Also, if you ride with a power meter, I'd like to hear about it. Please make a comment below. And if you don't ride with a power meter, maybe you could tell me why you have chosen not to ride with a power meter when they've become so much more prevalent in the cycling industry. All right. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you up the road.